The night my marriage ended didn't start with a fight. It started with laughter, champagne, and a room full of people who thought they were celebrating us. 7 years married, 10 years together. A milestone everyone kept calling rare, beautiful, proof we'd made it. I stood beside my husband, glass in hand, smiling the way you smile when you've learned how to hold yourself together even when something inside you is already splintering. My heart wasn't racing. That came later. Right then, it was steady, almost eerily calm. Because I already knew. 3 months earlier, I'd stopped being just a wife and started becoming a witness. I noticed the way his phone was always face down, the way late meetings became the default explanation, the way one coworker, someone I'd barely heard about in years, suddenly became the punchline of every story, the hero of every workday, an invisible presence in our home. I tried to say something once. "You talk about her a lot." He laughed, sharp, dismissive. "Are you serious right now? She's just a colleague. God, you're being insecure." That word, insecure, did what it always does. It shut me up. No woman wants to be the jealous wife. So I swallowed the discomfort, told myself I was imagining things, told myself marriages have seasons. I was wrong. By the time I saw the messages, by accident, I told myself, though my body already knew where to look, I understood something that chilled me more than the affair itself. This wasn't something that happened. It was something he'd been arranging. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I took screenshots. I backed everything up. I put the device back exactly where I found it. And then I waited. So when my husband clinked his glass that night and smiled at our guests, when he thanked everyone for coming, when he said 7 years was something worth celebrating, I knew exactly what he was about to do. He thought this party was his stage. He thought he was about to make me the villain. When he turned to me, voice trembling just enough to sound believable, and said, "I can't keep living a lie. I know you've been cheating." The room went silent. 40 people watched me. I looked back at him, steady, breathing slow, hands still. And that's when I reached for my phone. Because if he was going to tell a story, I was going to make sure it ended with the truth. I met my husband long before I learned how to doubt my own instincts. We were in our mid-20s then, both ambitious, both tired. In that way people get when they're building something and pretending they aren't afraid it could all collapse. He worked in software development. I was in marketing. We understood deadlines, late nights, the quiet pride of doing well without needing to announce it. Our first dates were simple: coffee after work, long walks where neither of us checked our phones, conversations that felt balanced, like we were both leaning in at the same time. He listened back then, or at least I thought he did. When we moved in together, it felt earned. No rush, no pressure. We split things easily, naturally. Our incomes were similar, our lifestyles aligned. The house came later, an inheritance from his grandfather, 5 years into our relationship. He was clear it was his, legally, and I respected that. It never felt like leverage, just a fact. Life settled into something solid, predictable in the best way. We got married quietly, no drama. 7 years later, people still described us as stable. We hosted dinners. We showed up to birthdays. We were the couple friends pointed to when things got messy in their own relationships. I believe that version of us. Looking back now, I see how much of that belief rested on my willingness to smooth things over, to be reasonable, to not rock the boat. When he forgot anniversaries, I told myself work was stressful. When conversations became shorter, I blamed routine. When his criticism started slipping in, small comments about my hobbies, my friends, my clothes, I told myself marriage required adjustment. I didn't realize those comments were practice. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in quietly, disguised as honesty. You could dress more professionally. Your friends don't really have direction. You take things too personally. Each remark landed softly but left a mark. I felt myself shrinking in ways I couldn't explain. My breath got shallower around him. My words became more careful. Then he moved into the guest room. "You snore," he said casually, "and I have an important presentation." I've never snored, not once, but I didn't argue. I told myself sleep arrangements weren't a crisis. Couples go through phases. What I didn't know was that while I was giving him space, he was giving someone else access. 8 months of it. 8 months of texts, photos, plans, jokes about how oblivious I was, conversations about money, about timing, about what he deserved after years of marriage. One message burned itself into my memory. "When are you finally leaving her?" "Soon," he replied. I just need to set things up right. That was the moment everything clicked. I wasn't married to a man who slipped into an affair. I was married to a man who was preparing an exit and a story to go with it. So I stopped reacting and started preparing. I watched him the way you watch someone who doesn't know you've already stepped out of the illusion. I noticed how he framed arguments, how he spoke about me to others, how carefully he curated the image of himself as patient, misunderstood, burdened. If this ended the way he intended, I wouldn't just lose my marriage. I'd lose my voice. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. After I found the messages and said nothing, everything around me sharpened. His tone shifted depending on who was in the room. His version of events changed depending on his audience. At home, he was distant, cool, clipped, impatient. In public, he was attentive, almost gentle, a hand on my back. A smile held just long enough for witnesses to register it. He was building contrast. If I looked unhappy, it would be my fault. If I reacted, I would look unstable. If I stayed quiet, he could keep shaping the narrative. He started picking fights about nothing. My clothes were uninspired. My interests were juvenile. My friends were stuck. Each comment landed like a paper cut. Small, precise, hard to argue without sounding defensive. When I tried once, just once, he sighed and said, "Why do you always make everything into a problem?" I stopped responding after that, not because I agreed, but because I understood the trap. At the same time, he began laying groundwork outside the house. I noticed the posts, vague quotes about knowing your worth, outgrowing toxic dynamics, choosing peace. Nothing explicit, just enough to suggest something was wrong, enough to plant seeds. When friends asked how we were doing, he laughed lightly. "Marriage is hard, you know. We're working through some stuff." Working through me, I realized. So I quietly took steps of my own. I didn't confront him, I didn't warn him, I documented. Screenshots, backups, dates, times, patterns. I called my brother. Corporate law, not family law, but close enough to know where to send me. The divorce attorney he connected me with didn't sugarcoat anything. "Your spouse is planning something," the lawyer said after listening. "This isn't impulsive, it's strategic. Document everything. Don't tip your hand. Open a separate account. Secure your documents." I followed every instruction. I moved half our shared savings, legally mine, into an account he didn't know about. I gathered copies of the house deed, the will, anything proving the house was inherited before the marriage. Every action felt surreal, like I was preparing for a storm that hadn't arrived yet. Then, 2 weeks later, he came home smiling. "We should throw an anniversary party," he said. 7 years. It's a milestone. Let's do it big." This from the man who had forgotten our last 2 anniversaries. The man sleeping in another room. The man who'd spent months making me feel small. Every instinct in my body screamed. This wasn't reconciliation, this was theater. He wanted an audience. He wanted witnesses. I smiled and said, "Sure, sounds great." The relief on his face told me everything I needed to know. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room, the house silent except for my own breathing. If he wanted a stage, I would let him have it. But I wasn't going to play the role he wrote for me. I was going to change the ending. The 2 weeks leading up to the party passed faster than I expected. He threw himself into planning with an energy I hadn't seen in months. Guest lists, catering options, music, decorations, 40 people minimum, he insisted. Friends, family, his coworkers, mine. The more, the better. Every detail confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about celebrating us, this was about exposure. I watched him rehearse without realizing he was rehearsing. Little comments slipped into conversation, always framed just right. "People have noticed you've been distant lately," he said one evening, casually, like he was offering concern instead of laying groundwork. Another time, in front of friends, he laughed and added, "She's been glued to her phone recently, probably hiding something from me." Everyone chuckled. I smiled. No one noticed how still I went. At night, when the house was quiet, I prepared. I had already backed up the messages, the photos, the plans, the timelines. But one piece was missing. Context from the other side. Proof that this wasn't just an affair, but a coordinated attempt to destroy me publicly. So while he showered one morning, steam filling the bathroom, I picked up his phone. My hands didn't shake. I found her number in seconds. I stepped into the hallway, closed the door softly behind me, and dialed. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello?" "This is his wife," I said calmly. Silence. I know about you two, I continued. I'm not calling to threaten you. I just want to understand what I'm walking into before I file for divorce. She started to stammer, then tried to hang up. Please don't, I said quietly. I just want the truth, woman to woman. Something in my voice must have shifted, or maybe guilt finally caught up with her. We met at a coffee shop the next afternoon. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. I recorded everything on my phone, legally. She told me how it started. A conference out of state. Flirting that turned physical. 8 months of seeing each other twice a week. Tuesdays, Saturdays. He told me you were controlling, she said, eyes down. That you monitored his money. Isolated him. None of it was true. She shifted uncomfortably when I said so. He's been intense lately, she admitted. Talking about the divorce like it's a chess game. Said he needed witnesses, that he was going to confront you publicly about cheating. My breath caught, not from surprise, but from confirmation. And what did he think I'd do? I asked. She swallowed. Either admit it or lose control. The party was his perfect setup. I thanked her, stood up, and walked out without another word. That night, I edited the recording down to the essentials. Her admission, the timeline, his plan. I tested the audio, made sure every word was clear. The day of the party arrived wrapped in sunshine and false normalcy. He spent hours getting ready. New suit, fresh haircut, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You look great, he said to me, distracted, already imagining how the night would unfold. Guests arrived early, champagne popped. Laughter filled the house. My parents brought gifts. His family hugged me tightly. Friends raised glasses and congratulated us. I stood in the middle of it all, grounded, observant. She arrived late. They barely acknowledged each other, but I saw it. The glance, the electricity. They thought no one noticed. After about an hour, he clinked his glass. Thank you all for coming, he began. 7 years is a real milestone. Smiles, applause, raised glasses. I stepped beside him like the good wife everyone believed me to be. Then his tone changed. But I can't keep pretending, he said, voice trembling just enough. I can't keep living a lie. The room went still. He turned to me. I know you've been cheating. Gasps, whispers. Shock rippled through the room. His mother covered her mouth. His father's face went red. Friends stared at me, waiting. Waiting for denial. Tears. A breakdown. I looked at him, steady. Really? I asked. Don't you dare deny it, he snapped, leaning into the role. Everyone here knows something's been wrong. I reached for my phone. Interesting, I said quietly, because I've been completely faithful. I connected to the Bluetooth speaker sitting on the mantel. And since we're airing everything out in front of everyone, I added, thumb hovering, let's make sure we're telling the right story. I hit play. Her voice filled the room. It started 8 months ago, at the conference. His face drained of color. People turned, murmurs swelled, glasses lowered. She said you never noticed, her voice continued. He wanted to make you look bad so the divorce would favor him. The silence afterward was suffocating. I stopped the recording. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before, and for the first time in months, my heart finally moved. Faster, not from fear, but from certainty. This was the moment everything broke open. For a few seconds after the recording stopped, no one moved. Not a cough, not a shuffle of feet, just 40 people holding the same breath, trying to recalibrate reality in real time. My husband was still staring at me, his mouth slightly open, like he was waiting for the room to correct itself. You recorded her? He finally snapped. That's illegal. His voice came out too loud, too sharp. It was legal, I replied calmly. His father stood up abruptly and walked out without a word. The door closed hard behind him. His mother, who had been crying seconds earlier, froze, tears suspended, hands half raised, like her body hadn't gotten the update yet. The people who had rushed to comfort him minutes ago started to step back. Not dramatically, just enough. Like they didn't want to be standing too close to something radioactive. You set me up, he hissed, leaning toward me, his smile gone now. You humiliated me. I met his eyes. No, I said quietly. You set me up, I just came prepared. Someone behind us whispered, oh my God. I turned slightly, addressing the room without raising my voice. I'm sorry you all had to see this, I said. I didn't want it to happen this way. But he was right about one thing. I paused, letting the silence do the work. The lying is over. He took a step toward me, face tight, like he might say something else, something angrier, more desperate, but I didn't wait for it. I picked up my coat. Oh, I added, stopping at the door, hand on the handle. And I filed for divorce this morning. You'll be served Monday. The words landed harder than the recording ever could have. You can't just, he started. I can, I said, not turning around. And I did. Then I left my own anniversary party. The drive to my brother's place was surreal. My hands were steady on the wheel. The city lights blurred past, unfamiliar, like I was moving through a life that had already shed its old skin. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, from my parents, from people who had been at the party and people who hadn't, most of them supportive, some stunned, a few furious on his behalf. I blocked the numbers that mattered least. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, the fallout began. With my brother's help, I changed every lock on the house, every door, every access point. It felt symbolic and necessary all at once. That afternoon, he showed up. I watched him through the Ring camera as he stood on the porch, suit jacket wrinkled, jaw clenched, pounding on the door like force could undo paperwork. "You can't kick me out of my own house," he yelled. "Actually," I said through the speaker, my voice even, "it's my house, inherited before the marriage. Your name was never added. Your things will be ready for pickup this weekend." He screamed for 30 minutes straight. The neighbors definitely heard. I documented everything. When he was served at work, I heard later that he caused a scene. His coworker, the one from the recording, was there. Apparently the room went very quiet. His lawyer called mine, aggressive at first, talking about spousal support, the house, assets. My lawyer responded with one question. "Did your client mention the 8-month affair, the recorded confession, and the 40 witnesses?" There was a long silence. Then, "We'll be in touch." His mother tried calling from a different number. "How could you humiliate him like that?" she demanded. "He tried to humiliate me first," I said. "This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup." Then I hung up and blocked her too. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I came home from work and found him sitting on the couch. Calm, casual, like nothing had happened. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach dropped, not from fear, but from disbelief. "You broke in," I said. "You need to leave. Now." He tried crying. Apologies. Promises. "I ended it," he said. "We can fix this." I shook my head. "I loved who I thought you were," I told him. "That person doesn't exist." His face hardened instantly. "Fine," he snapped. "Then I'm taking everything." I didn't raise my voice. "The house is mine. Your affair affects alimony. Good luck." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I called a locksmith immediately. Spent $900 on new locks, window security, and a system upgrade. Worth every penny. Because that was the moment I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming safety. And I wasn't done yet. The quiet after he left wasn't peaceful. It was alert. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the click of the thermostat, the soft whir of the new security system arming itself. I moved through the room slowly, touching walls, door frames, the back of the couch, grounding myself in what was real and still mine. I didn't cry. Not then. What I felt was vigilance. The next escalation came from a place I hadn't anticipated. His job. 2 days after he broke in, I received an email from HR at his company. Polite, neutral, carefully worded. They wanted to address a concern he had raised. Apparently, he had filed a complaint claiming I was harassing him by having divorce papers served at his workplace. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I scheduled the call. On the video meeting, I kept my posture relaxed, my voice steady. I explained the timeline, the affair, the party, the recording. I told them I had documentation and asked if they'd like to hear it. There was a pause. "Yes," one of them said quietly. I sent the file. After an internal review, the response came back in the language companies use when reality has teeth. "We weren't aware of this relationship," the HR director finally said. "That violates our workplace conduct policy." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. A few days later, I learned both of them had been fired. Strict no fraternization policy, especially between people reporting to the same division head. He texted me from a new number. "You got me fired. I'm suing you." I replied once. "I answered HR's questions. You violated company policy. That's not my problem." Then I blocked that number too. He spiraled after that. I heard it through friends at first. Angry outbursts, long rants, blame directed everywhere but where it belonged. Then the legal threats started arriving more formally. His lawyer sent a letter demanding half the house, lifetime spousal support, compensation for emotional distress, and somehow ownership of my car. That one almost made my lawyer choke. "Is the car titled in your name?" she asked. "Yes." "And who's been making the payments?" "I have, for 5 years." "Then it's your car," she said simply. "You can sell it if you want." I sat with that information for a day. Then I drove it to a dealership. Sold it for $8,400. Not amazing, but it was paid off. Clean break. When he texted, "Where is my car?" I replied, "My car. I sold it. The title is in my name." The voicemail he left after that was intense. Screaming, threats, accusations, the kind of message you don't delete because it documents itself. I forwarded it to my lawyer. His lawyer responded angrily. Mine sent back the title paperwork and suggested they reconsider their position. Things got quieter after that. Not calmer, just quieter. Then came the sister. Apparently, he was crashing on her couch. A one-bedroom apartment. Tension already high. According to mutual acquaintances, they were fighting constantly. She had heard the full story, not the curated version, the real one. And she wasn't impressed. He tried another tactic next. Remorse. He showed up outside the house one afternoon, standing on the sidewalk this time, careful not to cross any legal boundaries. "I'm sorry," he said when I stepped out onto the porch, keeping the door behind me locked. "We had 7 good years. Doesn't that count for anything?" I studied his face, the familiar angles, the eyes I'd once trusted. I noticed how his hands shook slightly now, how the confidence he'd worn so easily before didn't sit right anymore. "You had 8 months of lying," I said, "and months before that of positioning me as the villain." He swallowed. "Can't we at least be civil?" "No. You're really going to throw away everything we built?" "You already did," I replied. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." His mother was waiting in a car down the block, watching. I felt her stare like pressure between my shoulders. I didn't care. The legal process dragged on, but the momentum had shifted. His first lawyer quit after he screamed at him. The second dropped him after he refused to accept reality about the house. By the time he got to a third attorney, the tone changed. Now it was about minimizing damage. Meanwhile, my life, quietly, unexpectedly, started to expand. Work noticed my focus, my consistency. I got a promotion with a $15,000 raise. It happened after the divorce filing, so it didn't factor into the settlement. Timing matters. I redirected the money I'd been spending supporting 2 people into investments. The house began to feel different, lighter. I painted the bedroom, bought new furniture, removed anything that reminded me of him. For the first time in a long time, the space felt like mine. But the darkest part was still ahead. Because just when I thought the chaos had peaked, he made one last attempt to rewrite the narrative. And this time, it went to court. Court has a way of stripping emotion out of everything. No raised voices, no dramatic speeches, just fluorescent lights, polished wood, and people speaking about your life like it's a spreadsheet. That's where his final attempt to control the story unfolded. By then, he was on his third lawyer. The first had quit after he screamed at him in his office. The second dropped him when he refused to accept that the house was never going to be his. The third, this one looked tired from the start. A man hired not to win, but to contain damage. Still, my husband wasn't ready to let go of the fantasy where he was the victim. He tried everything. He claimed I had forced him to quit his job, that I had financially abused him by selling his car, that the party recording was meant to humiliate him, something close to revenge porn, his lawyer said, visibly uncomfortable even bringing it up. I sat there listening, hands folded in my lap, heart steady but heavy. Not because I doubted the truth, but because hearing someone you loved rewrite reality so completely does something to your chest. When my lawyer responded, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She showed the titles to the car, the payment history, the inheritance paperwork for the house, the timeline of the affair, the recording, played softly, professionally, without drama. The judge sighed at one point. Actually sighed. "It was her car," he said flatly. "She can sell her own property." On the recording claim, the judge didn't even pause long. "A recording of an affair partner admitting to an affair," he said, glancing down, "at a party where the husband was actively accusing his wife of cheating. That's not revenge. That's evidence." Denied. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt tired. There's a particular exhaustion that comes from having to prove, over and over, that you didn't imagine your own betrayal. Outside the courtroom, he tried again, quieter this time. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping closer than necessary. "We had 7 good years. Doesn't that mean anything?" The words almost worked, not because they were true, but because memory is persuasive. I looked at him and felt something finally break loose inside me. "You had 8 months of lying," I said quietly, "and months of planning before that. We're done." "You're really throwing everything away," he muttered. I shook my head. "You already did. I'm just refusing to carry it anymore." His mother stood a few feet away, staring at me like I had personally dismantled her family. Her eyes were sharp, accusing, unblinking. I met her gaze once. Didn't flinch. Then I walked away. That night, alone in the house, the weight finally hit. Not in a dramatic collapse, not in tears on the floor. It came quietly. I sat on the edge of the bed, the new bed, the one I bought after everything, and felt the emptiness where certainty used to live. 7 years isn't nothing. 10 years together isn't nothing. There were versions of us that were real, or at least real to me. And grieving that, grieving the person I thought I was married to, was harder than anger ever was. I cried then, softly, briefly, honestly, for the woman who trusted too easily, for the time that couldn't be refunded, for the future I had planned with someone who was already dismantling it behind my back. But even in that dark moment, something else was there. Relief, because the truth was out. The narrative was no longer his to control, and the worst part, the uncertainty, was over. I didn't have to guess anymore, didn't have to wonder if I was crazy, didn't have to keep shrinking to preserve a lie. I slept that night without fear of footsteps, without waiting for a phone to light up, without bracing myself for the next accusation. And when I woke up the next morning, the house was quiet. Not empty, quiet. And for the first time since the affair came to light, I realized something important. The dark moment wasn't losing my marriage. It was realizing how close I had come to losing myself. The turning point didn't arrive with a bang. It came in fragments. A signed document slid across a conference table, a judge's nod, a pen placed carefully back into my bag. The divorce moved faster after that, not because he accepted reality, but because he kept running out of money to fight it. Each lawyer lasted less time than the last. Each strategy collapsed under the same weight. Evidence doesn't bend just because someone is angry. The settlement took shape piece by piece. The house was confirmed as separate property, locked in, untouchable. The retirement accounts were divided, but the affair mattered. I kept 65% of the marital portion. Spousal support was negotiated down, far from what he demanded, temporary instead of permanent. It wasn't a victory parade, but it was fair. And fairness felt like oxygen after months of holding my breath. Outside the courtroom on one of the final days, he tried once more. "I'm sorry," he said, quieter now, less performative. "I really am." I studied his face. The anger had faded, replaced by something hollow. "Are you sorry you cheated?" I asked, "or sorry it didn't work?" He didn't answer. "That's what I thought," I said, and walked past him without waiting. His mother watched from a distance, arms crossed. She didn't say anything this time. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she didn't. It didn't matter anymore. Life started to shift in small, tangible ways. The promotion at work settled in. 15,000 more a year. Enough to notice. Enough to breathe easier. Enough that when my lawyer mentioned it wouldn't factor into the settlement because of timing, I almost smiled. I refinanced some investments, redirected money that had once disappeared into shared expenses and quiet resentment. The spousal support stung. $850 a month for 2 years, but it had an end date. I could live with that. What I couldn't live with anymore was shrinking. I redecorated the house fully this time. Not just paint, energy. I got rid of everything that felt like compromise. The couch we'd argued over, the dining set chosen to please his mother, the guest room that had once symbolized distance. I turned it into an office, my space. Friends noticed the change before I did. "You look lighter," one of them said over dinner. "Like you're not bracing anymore." I realized she was right. I wasn't. I stopped waiting for the next accusation. Stopped replaying conversations in my head. Stopped wondering if I could have prevented any of it. Because the truth had finally landed where it belonged. With him. I heard through mutual friends that his life was unraveling. Still unemployed. Living with his sister. Constant fights. No contact from the woman he'd risked everything for. Apparently, consequences are a lot less romantic when they show up all at once. He told people I had trapped him in an abusive marriage, that I'd ruined his career, that I was cold and calculating. The 40 people at the party knew better. So did the judge. So did I. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. Signed, sealed, done. He sent one last message. "Hope you're happy. You destroyed my life." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed back. "I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to be your victim." And I blocked him everywhere. That was the moment I felt it. Real, unambiguous release. Not joy, not triumph. Freedom. I wasn't defined by what he did to me. I wasn't carrying his shame. I wasn't responsible for the story he wanted to tell. I had changed the ending simply by telling the truth. And once you do that, power shifts. Permanently. Once the divorce was finalized, people expected things to calm down. They didn't. They clarified. The chaos didn't disappear. It redistributed itself, mostly onto him. Through mutual friends, I heard fragments at first. Nothing dramatic, just patterns. Missed rent payments, awkward borrowing. Excuses layered over excuses. His sister, who had offered her couch with a sense of obligation more than love, was already exhausted. Living with consequences, it turns out, is far harder than planning around them. He burned through lawyers the same way he'd burned through trust. The third attorney, now reduced to damage control, pushed him towards settlement simply because there was nothing left to argue. No leverage, no narrative that held up under scrutiny. Money became the loudest reality check. Without his job, the spousal support he'd fought so hard to secure barely kept him afloat. $850 a month, something he once sneered at as insulting, now mattered in ways he hadn't anticipated. He tried to appeal, failed, tried to delay, couldn't afford to, tried to reframe. No one was listening anymore. The woman he'd had the affair with disappeared completely. No messages, no calls, no solidarity once consequences showed up wearing legal shoes. Meanwhile, my life stabilized into something quieter and stronger. Legal fees totaled just under $9,000. Not insignificant, but finite. A cost with an endpoint. I tracked it the way I tracked everything now, clearly, deliberately, without emotion attached. I returned to routines I'd abandoned without realizing it. Morning walks, evenings without bracing for tension, conversations that didn't require translation. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd overridden my instincts for so long, how silence had seemed safer than clarity, how easy it is to mistake patience for loyalty. Dating crossed my mind, but I didn't rush it. Coffee here and there, no pressure, no promises, just remembering what it feels like when someone is actually interested in listening. One person, kind, grounded, curious, reacted when I mentioned the party. "That's the coldest thing I've ever heard," she said, then smiled. "I mean that as a compliment." I laughed, not because I felt proud, but because I felt understood. My brother checked in weekly. Sometimes we talked about the divorce. Sometimes we talked about nothing at all. That mattered more than he probably realized. My mother called too. "Are you okay?" she asked one evening. "I'm good," I said. And this time it wasn't reassurance. It was fact. She paused, then said quietly, "I'm proud of you." I found out later that my ex was still telling anyone who would listen that I'd ruined his life, that I'd been manipulative, cruel, calculated. The people who believed him weren't in that living room. They didn't hear the recording. They didn't watch the truth land. The ones who were there didn't need convincing. The house changed as I changed. I refinanced investments after the promotion, paid off lingering balances, redirected money once spent, maintaining someone else's comfort into my own future. The spousal support stung, but it had a finish line. 2 years, 24 payments, a countdown I didn't obsess over because I didn't need to. I had something better now. Stability that didn't depend on someone else behaving well, peace that didn't require silence, self-respect that wasn't conditional. He became background noise, a story other people told me, not one I lived inside anymore. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the thing I'd feared most stopped hurting. Not because it never mattered, but because it no longer defined me. The last thing to settle wasn't the paperwork. It was the silence. When everything was signed and blocked and finalized, there was a moment, standing alone in the house one evening, when I realized no one was waiting for me to explain myself anymore. No one was watching for a reaction. No one was preparing to twist my words into something else. The quiet wasn't heavy. It was clean. I walked through the room slowly, noticing details I'd missed for years. The way light hit the walls in the late afternoon. The steadiness of my own breathing. The absence of tension in my shoulders. This place had always been a house. Now it was a home. People still ask if I regret how public it became. No. He chose the venue. He invited the audience. He planned the confrontation. I didn't escalate it. I corrected it. Would I have preferred honesty in private? Of course. But that option was never offered. He wasn't confused. He wasn't lost. He was running a con, and cons rely on silence. I stopped playing. Sometimes I miss the idea of partnership, the version of marriage I thought I had. But I don't miss him. I miss what I believed we were building, something that apparently never existed. That's the hardest truth to accept. Not that someone cheated, but that they were dismantling the relationship long before you caught them. I'm not bitter, I'm precise. Next time, if there is a next time, I'll listen when something feels off. I won't swallow discomfort to keep the peace. I won't let anyone convince me that intuition is insecurity. Because love doesn't require you to disappear. The financial hit was real. Legal fees, temporary support, an expensive lesson. But I kept what mattered, my work, my home, my dignity. He lost everything he tried to steal quietly. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. When someone tries to turn your life into a performance, you don't owe them applause. You owe yourself the truth. And once you tell it, out loud, clearly, without apology, the ending changes. Not because you won, but because you refused to be the mark. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that quiet doubt, that slow realization that something isn't right, you're not alone. Thank you to everyone who shared their support, their own experiences, their honesty. If you have thoughts, leave a comment. If this story helped you see something more clearly, share it. And if you want to hear more stories like this about boundaries, betrayal, and choosing yourself, make sure you're subscribed. We'll keep telling them, because silence protects the wrong people. And truth, told at the right moment, changes everything.